All right, so like a lot of you out there, I am currently reading the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. I love these books. And as a dungeon master, it really got me thinking about the usage of magic in gameplay. Now, in the book series, we've got a whole new system of magic called allomancy, which is phenomenal in its own right. Go read the books. You're going to totally enjoy it. But it got me thinking about the spell components in D&D 5e and how oftentimes we overlook a lot of the components that are required to cast these spells. And we certainly overlook the descriptive elements in the narrative when we're casting them. Now, if you're reading Mistborn, you know that those descriptive elements and how metals are burned to push and pull other metals is really quite important. And it's reinvigorated this idea that we need that level of detail in our gameplay. So join us as Garret and I talk about material components in spellcasting in Dungeons & Dragons 5e right now. Hey everybody, welcome to iCast Guidance, your Dungeons & Dragons podcast, where every week Garret and I take a ruler mechanic in the game of D&D that's lackluster or needs improvement, and we offer you advice on how to make your game around that rule more interesting or more fun. So sharpen up those daggers. We're getting started right now. Hey everybody, welcome to iCast Guidance, your Dungeons & Dragons podcast, where every week Garret and I bring you a new topic where we try to make that game more immersive, or we try to make that game more honest is another word I'm thinking about. Garret, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm finally thankful that we're out of this weather insanity, honestly.
We have had an insane week of weather, to say the least.
We just came off of 24 full hours without power. I didn't think we were going to be able to record today. I was like, and I'm not prepared. Well, I'm prepared, but I'm not as prepared as I want to be because I've had no internet for a day. It's fucking torture.
Life without internet.
Oh my God.
What are you going to do?
I don't know. So today we are going to talk in our podcast about the components of spells. And of course, we've got verbal components, we've got somatic components, and we've got material components. And this is all from the standpoint of us having kind of a more honest and immersive game.
Yeah.
Because this bugs me. A lot of stuff about spells really bug me. And we can go on and on all day about this. You know that as a DM, when I'm playing with you guys, I try to make you learn your spells. I'm like, oh, you leveled and you got a couple extra spell slots, and that wizard over there learned this. You don't have that spell yet. Where'd you get that? I'm going to make you be honest about how you got that. So in the name of getting a more immersive and honest and true game, we stick to this stuff, or at least we try to.
We try to. It's difficult when you have certain classes that just magically get all their spells.
Like the cleric.
Yeah. Or druid, or a lot of them.
Sure.
But yeah, bringing some components into it can definitely liven it up a little bit, or...
Well, this is also the reason the components were invented in the first place.
Right.
Was because the spells themselves were either too overpowered or needed some kind of grounding in reality, for what that's worth. So, for example, if we have somatic components, we can visually see the caster sort of going through some movements. So I love this part about the game. I think one of the reasons we chose to bring this topic up was this is something that is constantly forgotten about. And I'm not going to state that this happens in everyone's game. I know that a lot of people really do a great job with remembering some of these details and minutia. We don't.
No, we honestly, a lot of times we don't.
Yeah. I was just talking to you before we started recording about Identify. Mm-hmm. And that Identify requires you to have a pearl worth 100 gold pieces and an owl's feather. Mm-hmm. I don't ever remember talking about that. And I know that those things exist. Mm-hmm. And of course, some of our listeners are going to come back at us and say, yeah, but the component pouch. But we've got our problems with that. So we'll go into that in a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get in there.
Yeah. So first and foremost, do you have a spell? And I'm going to put you on the spot here because we didn't talk about this in our prep. Do you have a spell that is your favorite, something that you really like in terms of how the VSM, verbal, somatic, and material components kind of go down? Like something that just seems to work for you.
All right. I've never played a wizard, but no, I have never played a wizard.
I'm like, what?
No, I've never. One of the main reasons, okay, side tangent here. One of the main reasons Wizards are so expensive and complicated, I don't want to deal with it. It's just like, I don't want to have to pay for 90% of every single one of my spells and put it into a book. And I've played a cleric, loved it, and maybe that's the reason, but I've never played a wizard.
That's amazing. I didn't realize that.
No. But I think one of the things that if I did play a wizard, and this might be coming from a certain online D&D very popular show that everyone's probably seen, is a character that casts fireball all the time. And he used the motion that he smashed the bat guano into his hands. He formed the fireball. He threw it across the field. Mm-hmm. The fact that bat guano and,
Was it sulfur?
It's sulfur, right? Material components of fireball. It's bat guano and sulfur. The chemistry makeup of that essentially could create gunpowder if you look at it like that.
Right, because in shit, you have nitrogen.
Exactly.
Right. So nitrogen and sulfur, along combined with what, saltpeter?
Potassium nitrate, sulfur, and carbon can create gunpowder.
Right. So we have an explosive.
So I think just the idea of smashing shit with sulfur, you're creating an explosion.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Actually, this is a great spot to talk about how the material components in the player's handbook have these tongue-in-cheek jokes associated with what you... Now, if you look at the people, you're listening to us right now, go look through the player's handbook spells and check out the material components and look at how they kind of have this humor associated with them. Garrett, we've got a few of these listed. What are they?
Yeah, I found a few of these, not really thinking about it, but say, see invisibility. It's a common spell. You use talc and powdered silver. You're basically blowing talcum powder to coat the invisible person.
Right. It's literal.
Exactly. Alarm. It's a tiny bell on a string. You're essentially setting up a minor little booby trap. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, my favorite one, confusion. 3 nutshells. It's the classic ball in a cup game.
Right.
You're confusing the target.
Right.
Like, it's just hysterical.
I love that. And some of them actually get a little bit more, they're a little deeper in their humor and they're a little bit more imaginative in their humor. They're not as sort of direct, like Ice Storm, for example, which is a 4th level evocation spell. It's a pinch of dust and a few drops of water. Well, you could kind of see how the dust as the physical thing that maybe turns to ice, and the water itself sort of starts small and grows into something. Now that spell has a verbal, a somatic, and a material component. Verbal and somatic, of course, in all of these spells, verbal and somatic are almost always not really mentioned. That's up to you, the player, to sort of improvise if you're going to use it at all. But then when all those 3 things come together, it's the energy associated with those things that sort of plucks at the fabric of magical space.
Exactly.
And makes that dust and water, the material components, become a storm. I love that.
Yeah. Because you talked more of like a literal sense. On my list was a flesh to stone. Lime, water, and earth. It's literally the ingredients for concrete.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
So there are some of them out there.
And that's what? Flesh to stone?
Flesh to stone.
That's perfect. That is absolutely perfect. Locate object and locate creature and locate animals or plants all require either a forked twig, like a divining rod, or a bit of fur from a bloodhound. Obviously. Right? It's so straightforward. So, I kind of enjoy these things. And to sort of disregard them, to sort of just now play your game and forget that they exist, seems like we're doing a disservice to that really cool piece of humor that's been put into the game.
Yeah, because I think there's all kinds of potential for role-playing to, 1, use them, or 2, even find them.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. And as I had a conversation with Eric Fiorito in our last episode about DMs, the DM has to be willing to allow you to find these things. Now, it doesn't always have to be a straightforward, the shopkeeper happens to have a chunk of fur from a bloodhound, which I can't even see that happening. But the DM has to have some capacity to let you find this stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
So if you can agree in session 0 that you want to get into a deeply immersive game that tracks and follows spell components, this could be a good place to start. I mean, some spellcasters are probably, want to quit a game
I could see that.
that held them back.
Yeah. I could see that. And I could see some people really going for it, and some people like, no, I want the rules as written. Just give me a spell component pouch and let me cast my spells.
Yeah, let's talk about the spell component pouch, because this thing is just, I'm sorry, this as a fix to all of the components is just, I find it to be stupid.
It is so broken. In looking up ideas for this topic, I found a list of all the components that a wizard could have to cast from level 1 to level 9 in a component pouch. All the items, rules as written, anything that in the player's handbook in a spell that doesn't have a material cost or says that it's consumed by the spell can be used or created by a component pouch or a spellcasting focus.
Right. Now, to be clear, and I'm just going to jump in for 1 second.
Go ahead.
The physical description in the player's handbook of the component pouch itself is it is a small, watertight leather belt pouch. Small emphasis on small belt pouch that has compartments to hold all the material components and other special items you need to cast your spells, except for those components that have a specific cost. Okay. How many are there?
The list that I found, I did not count them. There's got to be over 100.
You need a belt pouch the size of a U-Haul.
Yes. And the funny thing is, I think I saw somewhere that the component pouch weighs 2 pounds.
2 pounds. That's outrageous. And on top of that, the only thing excluded from the component pouch is something that has a specific cost. So right off the bat, I jump into the player's handbook. I look up imprisonment, which is a ninth level abjuration spell. And the material component in that is a vellum depiction or a carved statuette in the likeness of the target. And a special component that varies according to the version of the spell you choose, worth at least 500 gold pieces. So I don't think the vellum or the statuette likeness counts as, this is a problem, right? This is where a mistake was made.
This is where...
And there's other versions of this too, right?
Yes. I found one spell in particular. It was the plane shift. It does say a rod worth 250 gold, but is that in the component pouch?
Well, no, because that wouldn't be based on the rules, because it says except for those components that have a specific cost.
True.
So since the rod worth 250, that I think in its nature would not be in there. But even if we just take the raw number of components alone, which is over 100.
Yes, it's an insane amount.
It's an insane amount. We can't say 100 for sure, but it's a number that would never fit in a small 2-pound watertight pouch. And let's say for some reason it did. Let's say that the component pouch is its own miniature bag of holding. Well, a bag of holding will give you the object you're looking for. Maybe that's how this is supposed to be played.
So maybe it's pretend it's a mini bag of holding.
I still hate it.
Because it does say in the rules, a wizard is able to locate any component with a free hand to cast that spell. In assumption that's within 6 seconds. You're going to sort through 100 items in 6 seconds and pick that one out?
Yeah, I'm fingering my pouch on my belt, and I magically bypass the bat guano to find, what, the honey?
Yes.
Give me a
you found the soft clay.
Yeah.
Did you mistake the soft clay
for the bat guano? Maybe.
So,
I mean, there's even things like fireflies in there. I got a firefly in my back. I mean, I know we're beating a dead horse here. I've already been over this 100 times, but come on.
Yeah. Well, that was one other thing that I was going to say. There are a lot of things in there that if you look at it in the sense of reality, there's things that can rot. There's things that are alive, like a live spider for spider climb.
Yep.
Is that just going to magically stay alive in a component pouch?
Right.
A snake's tongue. Is it a preserved snake's tongue?
Probably. It's probably like dried like jerky.
Okay.
But at the end of it all, if you have the snake's tongue, a small bar of iron, a drop of water, some honey, and bat guano, you pull that out, it's going to look like shit. It's going to all be smashed together and it's going to be useless. I just can't see this working.
Piece of a tentacle from a giant octopus.
Yeah, some licorice root.
There you go.
You know, it's just like, all right, so we get it. We get it. This is like...
kind of broken.
It's kind of broken. And I still think that it... oh, by the way, you forgot to mention in the spell Gust of Wind.
Oh, I did.
What is required for that, the material component, is a legume seed, aka a bean, because beans make you fart. What better than a fart to create your gust of wind spell?
Exactly.
Now, if you were just the right wizard, and you knew this, you caught that joke, right? Then you might not only want to find just the right bean that hadn't been pre-soaked before it was cooked so that you got all those elements out of it that made you gassy, and you consume the bean, and then you're almost like Ice Storm just uses a little water and a little dust. This uses one bean, and you have this gust of wind that comes from any place you want it to, frankly.
Yeah.
Here's the role play that is so possible in what's going on here, and we just kind of we skim over it. I feel like it just deserves such a better due than we give it.
That's what I was saying before. The opportunity for role play just in, casting your spells with these components, you could do such a better job.
I agree. All right, so we need a couple of things here in order to make that. We were going to talk about verbal, somatic, and material. We're kind of we jumped off the sort of
we kind of bounced.
We're still in material, so let's just talk about material for a little bit, because there are other things at play here that I'm interested in that we said that we could consider. And we haven't really talked about the specific items that cost money that are consumed, and how these can become side quests in a game. We know this already, right? If you need the different diamonds for the resurrection spells. We've got, I think, a 500 gold piece diamond.
There's a 300 is the most basic, but that can be multiple diamonds.
Right.
So that's Revivify. The resurrection, or was it Raised Dead?
Well, there's Revivify, Raised Dead, Resurrection, True Resurrection, and then a host of other things that...
we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We should know this.
We should.
Yeah.
We should. Well, there are other ones that we could talk about, like there's...
Well, True Resurrection is a 25,000. I know that one.
Perfect. A 25,000 gold piece, single diamond. Okay, so we got a couple things here. One, your shop merchant in town does not have this in stock.
The shop merchant doesn't have the Hope Diamond.
Exactly. Exactly.
You got to go on a quest for that.
Exactly. And so here's an opportunity, right? This is what I love, is that we have, when we're talking about some of the reward systems that are put into place in Dungeons and Dragons, it's like, kill the monster, get the experience. Kill the dragon, get the horde. In this case, it's like, you want to cast the spell, work for it, right?
Yeah.
Put some effort in there. Get yourself out on the road, going out to that mountain and locating, I don't know, or some nobleman that in their safe in the basement somewhere, there's a massive diamond. Okay, so how do you get in there? This is such a great opportunity.
Yeah, I like that idea, because you shouldn't just be able to, and it doesn't have to be the 25,000. It could be a different one. Maybe there are no diamonds worth 1,000 in the city. Maybe you do need to find that nobleman.
Right.
He's got all the big diamonds.
Right, exactly. And this is an opportunity for a DM to build a framework around the potential for either a diamond dealer or a group of kobolds that have secretly been taking, gems out of a dragon's hoard and putting them aside for some larger mission. And you want to crack that, thus both getting your diamond and befriending the dragon. I don't know. There's lots of ways that you could kind of pull this into play. I think there's some other things in here too. I know that Eric was saying he really wanted a twig that had been struck by lightning so he could cast Witch Bolt, right? There's a whole narrative that could unfold right there. But the DM has to be willing to let the weather turn bad in order for there to be a lightning strike, right? One other thing that we could consider, if the material component pouch bothers you as a DM, if this is the type of thing that just seems like it's busted, but you're going to use it anyway, okay, then what if that material component pouch gets lifted when somebody in town wants to pickpocket you and you lose it? And all of a sudden you're like, I cast Identify, and you say, well, do you have your owl feather and your pearl worth 100? Yeah, I've got it right here in my, oh shit, where's my component pouch? And you say, well, clearly somebody pickpocketed you.
I saw an example of that online.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect little hinge to put in there.
Yeah. Some way to kind of like throw them off the regularity of just spell casting after spell casting after spell casting and getting a little bit of interest into the game. It's like, fine, you don't want to play with locating all of your components? We'll take your little cutesy pouch away from you.
I did see someone else say that they limited the uses of the spell component pouch, and then the player had to replenish it. It only worked for so many times.
I like that. I feel like there could be a way to do that. Another thing I'd like to do, actually, and I know this has been done before, I know this is out there on the internet, but I kind of want to make my own. I want to compile a list of every single spell component from every single spell across the whole 5e spectrum. I want to parse out where this stuff is found, its rarity or how common it is, how much you would typically pay for it, etc., etc. Like what's the value? How frequently is it located? Or some version of that. You know, there are going to be things in here like, okay, bat guano. Have you been in the caves recently? Because you're not going to find bat guano. I don't think the provisions store in town has bat guano. So if you really want to get more granular and detailed in it, and you're like, okay, I want you to keep track of the spell components you have. I want you to find them. I think this makes the intensity of spell casting that much greater. I think it makes it that much more special. I know that without spells, the caster, not all casters, but a lot of casters are totally hobbled.
Yep.
Right? So I know that I am potentially taking something away here, but I think that caster should sort of take some responsibility for having to get their components.
I agree in that. And I mean, that's always something that you could discuss with your table in a session 0, how in depth you want to get with it. But I think there should be a, interaction with the spell components and spell casting.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's true. I guess there are lots of ways you could sort of, allow some flexibility in one area, but tighten it up in another. It's like, okay, I'm going to let you use the pouch, but I really want you to sort of have a limitation on the pouch, or I want you to realize that the pouch could disappear, or pouches are not sold in every single store. You're going to have to, if you lose it, you're going to have to find one. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the somatic components for a minute, because I think that's actually really important too.
Yeah. We were talking about that before coming on here. Spellcasting isn't just about the materials. It's about the verbal and the somatic, the gestures that you make in casting those spells. And a lot of people, I know at our table, a lot of people don't think what it takes to cast a spell, that it's usually, more often than not, a very visual or a spoken type of magic. And I can't tell you how many times at our table, we get into an interaction with a guard. Someone's like, I cast Charm Person. Pretty sure Charm Person is a verbal and somatic spell.
It is.
That guard's going to see you doing something.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the thing about it is we think that we can be discreet in casting magic. We think that because it is not a broadsword and you're not running down the alley with a broadsword over your head, that we can just kind of quietly, but that's not accurate at all. And I found a few really good comments in various threads online that I think put it in a way that I wished I had put it, but there's some really good stuff in here. So number one, there was this one commenter who said the words themselves aren't the source of the spell's power. Rather, the particular combination of sounds with specific pitch and resonance set the threads of magic in motion. And I'm like, oh God, that was like, I love the way you said that.
It was very poetic.
Yeah, not only poetic, but visual, right? Yes. It's like set the threads of magic in motion. Perfect. And I have to agree that if you are going to cause the existence of the power of magic to be set into motion and thus activate a spell, there is a resonance to your voice. There is a frequency to your voice that a whisper is not going to activate. But, and this is why, Gandalf is sort of like, you really hear the very deep resonating voice and when Gandalf will cast a spell, or even Saruman, like when he's shouting from the top of Orthanc.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yes. So there's kind of like, it's almost as if in order to set the magic threads in motion, just to use this quote again, you really have to sort of shout at the fabric of space and time, right? You're almost shouting at it. And so the idea of whispering a spell to me is totally absurd. And I almost never let a player do that.
Yeah, no, and I don't think it should be that easy. It should be something that has to be presented, like we just said. It has to be, forced out there, not just a little.
Right.
Because the rules say that if you're, silenced or gagged, you can't cast that verbal component of the spell. So if you're gagged, you're going to be able to mumble, but you're not going to be able to put it out there correctly.
Right. Exactly. And so in some respects, I would almost say a good DM, if somebody did want to try and do it discreetly, I would allow a variable for something to go wrong, like a wild magic kind of situation there.
Kind of like that.
Where you accidentally disrupt the fabric of magical space.
That's interesting.
There's another quote that I found that I love that says, spellcasting is an incredibly potent ability for any creature to have, and the ability to cast spells without being noticed is even more potent, right? So, for example, if you take verbal and somatic, meaning you are speaking words and you are making gestures, right? Then most people are going to spot you in a crowd. You're not exactly going to be discreet about it.
Yeah, you're going to be making weird hand motions or something.
Right. It's sort of like, let's go back to Harry Potter 4, where Hermione's looking around to see who's disrupting Harry's, use of the broom, and she spots Snape in the audience, and he seems to be muttering something into the air. And so I don't like this because he is trying to be discreet and it doesn't really go with what we're saying here. But she is able to spot who's casting the spell right now, even though it wasn't him.
Yes.
Right. So
spoiler.
I'm sorry. Sorry, it wasn't him. Not that. How old is Harry Potter now? These are not spoilers.
It was a joke. I'm sorry.
I mean, lame example to bring in, but not so lame, because it's sort of like you're going to be noticed if you're waving your arms around and shouting something in some kind of magical tongue. Okay. So on top of that, if you've got one finger in the component bag, one hand is gesturing for the spell, and you're making noise, sorry, you're not casting Charm Person on the guard discreetly. Not happening.
I agree on that one. I think that needs to be reined in a little more in certain games. Can't get away with it all the time.
No. All right. So let's backtrack for a second. Let's try to get back to this notion of making the game more immersive or more detailed or more honest, because, we can beat all these other very common areas around verbal, somatic, and material components to death. We don't like them. They're broken. As a player, do you have a wish that you could sort of ask for in how these things are handled in your game? Like, do you ever feel like something's missing, or that something was focused on more, or like, what is it for you that you'd like to see happen?
I noticed more recently in this new character that we're playing, this fresh campaign. I'm playing a warlock, but I noticed trying to put more roleplay into my components and trying to explain more somatic stuff. I think that comes from just motivation from other, outlets, different D&D shows that I, watch. Just trying to make it a little more, I guess, immersive, or a little more, RP based. That I remember explaining, I think the first time that I cast Armor of Agathis, splashing the water on myself, because I'm pretty sure the component is just a splash of water. Splashing that water on myself, and then my, body converting it into this armor. And I think just adding those things to the table, and I know at our table, Addie is fantastic at descriptive words and stuff, but it brings so much more into the table, where if a player's just like, I cast Fireball, plain, there's no heart to it or anything like that. So I think it's more like adding those components into casting of the spells, or even attacking with a weapon, anything. Just adding the descriptors in there, I think, helps stay more focused at the table, or just in it.
Well, I'm going to remind you of something you said to me, actually, that really is interesting right now, because what you're describing is wanting to have a better theater of the mind experience, because when someone gets descriptive about how they cast something, it's sort of like, oh, I can see this happening. I feel that. Cool. Well, you and I have been talking about Mistborn lately.
Yes. Yep.
I'm reading the physical book, and you at work, you're listening to it on an audiobook. And you just talked about how Kelsier's first, like when they're first getting into describing allomancy, and how fast the reader goes through the different actions of burning this metal and pulling and pushing, and how it added some excitement.
It was this, I'm listening to audiobook, and it was just this super fast paced, just one after another, and the descriptions in it brought me into it. Just all these, I burn this metal. If you haven't read the book, it's a whole magic system, but shooting across this, pulling this, pushing that, I throw this guard off. It was just so in-depth and immersive into it, listening to it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that had to do with the descriptors.
It was.
Yeah, so I feel like if we bring those descriptors into our game, we have now this whole new ability to sort of be more immersed. Brandon Sanderson in this book, I mean, you and I are sitting here, we're having a podcast on material components for spellcasting, and here is an entirely different system of material components where, frankly, verbal and somatic's gone, right? It's really an internal thing. So for those of you who have not read Mistborn, The Final Empire is the first book in the Mistborn series. I know there's a lot of theories out there about which books you should read first, because this is an endless...
That can get beaten with a pole.
Oh my God.
10 million times.
Oh my God. But I think Final Empire for Mistborn is a safe place to start. There are I know there's going to be some varied opinions out there. I'd be curious to know, because I'm only on the Well of Ascension right now, and I'm working my way up. So if you have any advice for me out there, I'd love to hear it. But one of the things we're lacking, and one of the reasons we're talking about this in a podcast, is being answered by Brandon Sanderson, who's putting in these amazing systems of how magic is used. And you haven't even gotten to feruchemy yet.
I know. I'm just starting.
So it's really good stuff. But I think what it boils down to, what we're trying to get at here, is how do we get the theater of the mind experience to be that much more? And I feel like here is an opportunity for us at the table to take it to that level, where it's sort of like, all right, we're giving you verbal, somatic, and material. This is an opportunity for the caster to describe something. You're describing it, how it comes out verbally, what gesture you're making with your body, which I think also has an opportunity for those joke levels, like, for example, casting confusion, and you have the 3 walnut shells. Perhaps your hands are kind of overlapping one another as if you are shuffling the shells. There's all this opportunity there.
Yeah, you use those components. I think it adds to it.
I think that's the whole reason why we need to get more structured in how we use that. Like, if I had my wish, so I just asked you what your wish was as a player at the game. My wish as the DM is that my table were able to be invested on the level of, they had a small notebook that had every single component they had found, bought, been given, that they had access to when they wanted to cast a spell. And it's like, I really want to cast Fireball right now, but I have no fucking bat guano. Does anyone have any bat guano? Right?
I hear you. I remember previous campaign when I got the ability to cast Scry, I believe. You need a crystal ball or a focus worth, I think it's 1,000 gold pieces. I can't tell you how long I asked for that component in our game, searching for it. I was in a town searching, moved to another town. I might have been another level or 2 after until I found that. But it was also the drive to find that component.
Yeah.
And if you just forget about them, it's just not as immersive.
Right. Yeah. I agree. And I mean, there has to be a willingness there on both parts too, because I don't think it's fair that DMs deny a player's ability to do a thing that they really want to do. I feel like, that's the game, right? So give it to them, but maybe give it to them not right away.
Yeah, let them work for it a little bit. Or, how we were saying before, if there's a certain thing, to go on a side quest.
Yeah.
I don't think, if you're at the level that you can cast Plane Shift, but you need that rod, I don't think you should just be able to walk into a store and buy that rod that's attuned to the astral plane.
Right.
I think you've got to go on a quest to find the hag in the woods that's known to have this rod or something.
Or go to the astral plane and find the rod that's tuned to the astral plane. Yeah.
I think it should be more than that.
I agree. All right. So at the end of the day here, I'm thinking that I'm putting the call out there for all of you to consider, how can these things make your game a little bit deeper? How can these things sort of maybe coerce or inspire, more importantly, inspire your players to have a more connected and theater of the mind based game, either through how they cast or what they use to cast. All right, so that's going to wrap us up for this episode of iCast Guidance. I want to encourage all of you listeners out there that are checking this out to head over to Wither and Bloom Studios on YouTube. Number one, follow us, and then get on the community page and get back to us, commenting in there. Throw some comments up. I'm going to actually put a post in there for all of you. Is what do you have at your table that utilizes either spellcasting components, or how do you deal with magic and casting in general to make your game more immersive or more flavorful? I'd love to hear what you're up to in that regard. And then,
yeah, I want to see comments on that.
Right.
What are you doing at your table?
Yeah, exactly. I really want to talk to people about this. And, we would live cast the recording of this, but you remember what happened last time we did that. So we need moderators. We'll go live when we have enough moderators to keep all the lunatics away. All right. So anyway, we're looking forward to dropping a new episode to you next week. In the meantime, thanks so much for listening, and we hope you continue to listen to iCast Guidance. We'll talk to you soon.
Good talking with you.
All right. Take care. All right, everybody. iCast Guidance is produced by Todd Lambrix and Garrett Brennan. Head over to YouTube, where we can be found at Wither and Bloom Studios, where you can see the production of this podcast every Sunday morning live at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Take care.